Deputy Wallace.
Oh, we've a minute each and an anonymous,
yes, I think that's correct.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks to the Concordia for picking the issue. Minister, in the future of policing Commission stuff released yesterday, there's been obviously a lot of talk about working closer with the community, and working closer with the community makes a lot of sense for Garda Síochána, and I think it's the public would like that, and it's in the public interest. But and when it comes to that, public perception is not insignificant, and with regard to the incident that we're talking about on South Frederick Street, for 12 public order Gardaí to go in with balaclava and 6 other regular Gardaís at least around, bringing a total to 18, is a bit mad and doesn't create the right public perception. And if the owner of the building gets a court order to evacuate the building and decides to hire a group of couriers to evacuate it, I don't think that the Gardaí should be giving such reinforcements the same, and I don't think it does them any good.
Thank you. Deputy Collins.
My question actually was on September the 11th. A group of men from a private security firm carried out an eviction at 34 North Frederick Street, Dublin. These men were masked, along with 3 members of the Garda Síochána, a Garda Ride Squad, a public order unit, a Garda Transit Connect van and a Garda Jeep with dogs. Some of these guards were also wearing masks with no ID numbers. I asked a question to ask the Minister what investigation has been set up to investigate if human rights abuses were committed, as was called by Amnesty Ireland, and the questions that need to be asked are very serious questions. When did the landlady get the enforcement notice? Normally that would go to the sheriff, who would actually implement the eviction, along with whatever he needs or she needs to implement that. Was the security firm passed by health and safety legislation? Were they vetted, the men that were there outside the door, security firm, were they vetted? I think those questions are very, very serious. And also, why, as Drew Harris has said, were guards wearing masks?
Thank you, Deputy Collins. Deputy Daly.
Minister, I think there was a certain irony in the situation that developed in North Frederick Street, that we had the new Garda Commissioner coming out and calling for transparency in the service, and then that appalling incident occurred where we had members of Garda Síochána in balaclavas dealing with the citizens. And now I know that, based on the way our law is and our constitution is, the owner of that site had a right to go and organise to have her property vacated. In that sense, if you like, it was a private matter between the owner and the people occupying the property. That the Gardaí felt it was their role to take sides in that situation is absolutely reprehensible, and will throw back any attempts being made to foster trust between the community and the Gardaí. And I'm wondering, in that context, Minister, what investigation have you called for with regard to those events? Because I think it's set back trust in the Gardaí by a huge amount, against that property would be valued ahead of human rights.
Thank you, Deputy Daly. Minister, your response, please.
Thanks, Clare. Deputies will be aware, of course, that the deployment of Gardaí, and indeed any Garda operation, is solely a matter for Garda Síochána. Deputies will be aware that Taoiseach addressed some of these issues yesterday during leaders' questions, but I can perhaps add some additional detail to the record of the House today. The Garda Commissioner has issued a statement on the incident referred to, so we all now have a greater level of clarity about what actually took place. I'm advised by the Garda authorities that, following an order of the High Court, a small number of community Gardaí were present to keep the peace. They were present to facilitate a peaceful protest, and they were present to facilitate the enforcement of a High Court order. Gardaí were not involved in the vacation of the premises, which had been illegally occupied. A private security firm acted for the owner of the premises on foot of the High Court order. The law and procedures governing the execution of court orders are contained in the Enforcement of Court Orders Acts and rules of court made under them. Any dispute in relation to the enforcement of a court order is solely a matter for the courts. Accordingly, persons involved in the execution of the High Court order are not therefore licensable by the private security authority. At present, I have to advise the House, however, my officials are currently examining the law governing this area, and I am giving this matter further consideration. As Garda Síochána has stated, a small number of community Gardaí were initially present. As the situation evolved, they were supplemented by more Gardaí, and then a small number of officers from the Public Order Unit were deployed. I want to be clear, the purpose of the Garda present was to keep the peace, to facilitate a peaceful protest, and to facilitate an order of the High Court being enforced. I know that there was some disquiet about members of the Public Order Unit wearing hoods. The Garda Commissioner has said they should have been worn in conjunction with helmets. Members will be familiar with public order police around the world wearing helmets in the course of their policing duties. Of course, it's a sad fact and a worrying development that Gardaí, and particularly those who undertake public order policing, are frequently personally targeted, subjected to vile abuse and threats, particularly online. At the protest itself, the Gardaí were subjected to sustained abuse, including one incident, racist abuse. I condemn that behaviour, and I am sure all members of the House will do likewise. Where behaviour crosses the line into criminality, it may be investigated, but of course it would be preferable if the crime didn't occur at all. I am appealing to those people involved in such protest to recognise that Gardaí simply doing their jobs should not be targeted in this way. This is a message that needs to go out from this House and from all sides of the House, and I would ask colleagues to join me in reinforcing that message. A small number of people were arrested as the protest for public order offences. As these matters are subject to ongoing Garda inquiries, the House would appreciate it would not be appropriate for me to comment on these issues. I do note, however, the recent statement of Commissioner Harris in relation to the protest, and I understand that he has requested a report from the Assistant Commissioner DMR to see what lessons can be learned from the event. I also note the Policing Authority will be pursuing this matter within Garda Síochána. Finally, Ceann Comhairle, I know that everyone in this House would agree the right to protest is a fundamental right in any democracy, one, of course, which must be protected and must be facilitated. However, it's also a right that must be exercised peacefully and with respect for the rights of others. In this context, we must not lose sight of the fact that the members of Garda Síochána were enforcing the law of the land, in what indeed were very difficult and tense circumstances.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Wallace.
Minister, you say Gardaí should not be targeted by protesters, and we agree 100%, and under no circumstances would we do likewise. But neither should the Gardaí have been exposed to this. And I'd like to know, Minister, who actually sent them in there? And I don't believe for a second that Commissioner Drew Harris sent them in there. I don't believe it was his decision for them to wear balaclavas. I'm sure he has better things to be doing than engaging in incidents like this. But we would like to know who took those decisions and whether anyone is going to be held responsible for it. And, Minister, I know the Commissioner is having his own investigation into it. I know that GSOC can't look at a Section 102 without the Commissioner or yourself authorising it, the same as that GSOC were never allowed to look at the Corrib gas incident. But this incident should be investigated in the interest of Garda Síochána. We want the public to trust the Garda Síochána 100%. And for that to happen, it's important that when things like this arise, that they should be investigated thoroughly, and you should facilitate it, Minister, please.
The landlady employed this private security firm to enact the court order. Was she not supposed to go and get an enforcement order? And on what basis then were the Garda asked? I mean, you're saying this solely for the matter for the Garda Síochána. Why did they feel that they had to send up then a Garda riot squad, a public order unit, a Garda transit connect van, mass Gardaí with no identification numbers on them, no identification numbers on the mass men from the private security firm also, did no identification of where they were, who they were working for and what they were doing there. This was very, very sinister, Minister, and I would stand over my colleagues as well and say I don't condemn violence. When I was arrested down at Parnell Road, I stood peacefully on the water meter. I didn't in any way challenge the guards. But if the guards think that someone has done something wrong, they arrest and convict on whatever the issue is. You don't go in with batons and dogs and pepper spray and everything like that in relation to an incident like this. It was a peaceful protest. Those people inside left the premises peacefully, and there was no need for the heavy-handed and what looked like a very, very sinister attempt by the guards and these private security firms.
Deputy Daly, please.
I think we have to be very conscious that this incident has set back public confidence in on Garda Síochána considerably. And that's actually my starting point on this issue. We have at the backdrop an unprecedented housing crisis where people are homeless, families are homeless, and that the Garda organisation, whose motto is supposed to be to protect and serve, rallies around to carry out an eviction, resonates really badly with the Irish publicly, and you call it politically with a small p. It was lunacy, whoever made the call, and like Deputy Wallace, I don't believe it was the Commissioner. The Minister says the Gardaí were only upholding the law. Well, my neighbour's house was broken into, and they called the guards, and they didn't see one for love nor money. That's their job as well. They chose to take sides in this instance. There was no signal that there were going to be public order problems of the scale that merited masks and balaclavas and all this type of carry-on and palaver, which was really intimidatory. And it does deserve an investigation. It particularly deserves an investigation given that concrete evidence has been produced which shows that the security firm were breaching the law, and yet the perception was the Gardaí were there to protect them and not actually the public.
Minister, you have 2 minutes.
I agree with Deputy Daly here that the trust and confidence in Garda Síochána is vital in any democratic society. I say to Deputy Collins that those present were acting in accordance with a High Court order, which my understanding is was lawfully obtained and was being lawfully executed. But I would reiterate again that the Gardaí present faced a most difficult task in managing protests, in enforcing the law. There was a matter of abuse, including racial abuse. Online threats and intimidation came to light at the weekend. Such threats are utterly unacceptable, rightly being investigated. The Gardaí work on our behalf. They need support from the public, not intimidation, not abuse. As I said, Commissioner Harris has made a statement in relation to the protest. I understand he's requested a report from Assistant Commissioner DMR to see what lessons can be learned from the event. I can assure the House that my department continues to work closely with all stakeholders, including in Garda Síochána, to further enhance the safety of the public at such events, while safeguarding the fundamental right of people to protest. Of course, if people have concerns about the way the Garda behaved, which I've just heard, if people have those concerns in relation to this or indeed any other matter, there are established procedures for pursuing such matters, and deputies are aware of the role of the Garda Síochána Ombudsman Commission in this regard.